Hello, and you are listening to Eco Justice Radio, a project of SoCal 350 Climate Action. Our show presents environmental and climate stories from a social justice frame, featuring voices not necessarily heard on mainstream media. Welcome. I am Jessica Aldridge. On today's show, Biotonomy, Designing Nature-Based Green Buildings and Cities, host Carrie Kim interviews Moein Nodehi, CEO and lead architect of Biotonomy, specializing in nature-based solutions for buildings and cities across the world. The architectural design from Biotonomy uses a holistic and nature-based approach for buildings and cities to address the climate and biodiversity emergency. Together with an international network, the team works to accelerate the transformation to autonomous development with nature-based solutions. Biotonomy's mission is to make buildings and cities become a force for restoring the natural world. Moein Nodehi is the founder, CEO, and lead architect for Biotonomy. Thank you for tuning in to Biotonomy, Designing Nature-Based Green Buildings and Cities with host Carrie Kim.
Aloha. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Carrie Kim, and we're thrilled to be here with Moein Nodehi of Biotonomy to talk about a holistic, nature-based approach to building and cities to address the climate and the current biodiversity crisis. We thank the Tongva ancestors of these lands as our show takes place on the ancestral homelands of the Tongva. Welcome, Moein. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning from Malaga, Spain.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, the pandemic has catalyzed many people to deeply consider and reconsider how we're living. Many people have actually abandoned cities in favor of simpler, more nature-connected living, or simply out of necessity, because they can no longer even afford a life in the cities. We recognize the unsustainable crash course of continuing our current consumerist, Anthropocene-centered lifestyle. We know, especially since 2020 and before then, that current systems of politics, economics, and the inequities in society is unraveling before our eyes. And this can be received actually as good news. So we can respond, as you're showing and demonstrating, to the turbulence of our times creatively, collaboratively, and learn to harmonize versus domineer nature. So if you could share with us, you know, Indigenous peoples have been doing this for countless eons, and we would do well to learn and embody their ancient wisdom. If you could share with us about the name Biotonomy, what is this pointing to?
Yeah. So basically, like you mentioned, what we do really is something that the ancient people have practiced for a long time. Before we even had infrastructure, we were developing our buildings based on the natural environment. Mm-hmm. We were using the right forms of design to achieve the performance we want out of our building. Mm-hmm. But then when we basically invented infrastructure, we started to just building structures and connect them to the utilities that we consume. Mm-hmm. So somehow we kind of lost the knowledge of how to design buildings without depending on infrastructure. Mm-hmm. But when you look at all the ancient civilizations, when there was no infrastructure, they were able to develop buildings that maintained comfortable temperatures, that had water, and they could process their own sewage. Mm-hmm. So they were living and sustaining life on the planet. And so does many other species on this planet. They all have learned how to sustain life without depending on centralized infrastructure.
Have you been learning also from our relatives in the natural world and how they build their homes and colonies? And
absolutely. So basically,
what have you studied most, or what's the most intriguing thing you've learned in doing that?
Well, basically, all the species have different solution of how they sustain life on Earth. And I mean, many times trees are a very good example because they really show how you live, in a circular way, how you reuse the byproducts that you produce for something else.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, looking at trees, looking at any kind of species on this planet, we learn their strategy of how to do it. It's not trying just to replicate, trying to build a building that looks like a tree. You have to understand the strategy. How do they treat waste?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Functionality, right?
Exactly. So you look at those strategies and then we mimic them and then we implement them into our buildings to achieve the same performance.
Would you say one of the key differences is that nature, of course, is already operating interdependently versus in human society, most things are much more separatist. You don't work so much as a network. People have single family home dwellings, everything. I mean, it didn't always used to be like that. We used to live in villages and be more community centric.
Correct. I mean, if you look at trees, you might see, individual trees growing here and there. But if you look what's going on underneath the ground, you simply realize that all the roots are connected with each other, and in between them, they send nutrients to each other. Whoever needs it, whoever has it more, they send it to each other. So they cooperate.
Yeah, and share.
And that's the way we need to design our future cities, is that we need to make all our buildings produce their own utilities, but also to co-work with each other and help each other, that when one building is low on one kind of resource, the buildings surrounding it can supply them and help.
Yeah, it goes back to village-minded consciousness, I would say. That concept of sharing is very important, especially, given the backdrop of the pandemic, at the early moments of the pandemic when people experience, especially here, a lot of hoarding, just kind of the worst that we could experience from people on a material level in that way.
Correct.
Could you share a little about your backstory? Did you emerge out of a career in conventional architecture?
Yes, I have an international architectural engineering degree. Mm-hmm. So I started to study around the world, and I started to work in different parts of the world. And I very quickly got involved in some of the biggest construction projects in the world, developing high-rise buildings, skyscrapers, basically. And I really quickly realized that this is completely the wrong direction we're going. Mm-hmm. This is nowhere close to where we need to go. So the conventional way of building kind of turned me off very quickly, and I started to search for alternative ways of building. So naturally, I started to look at how ancient people were building on this planet, because they designed their buildings without having infrastructure.
Right.
And then the more I was digging into that, I came across architects around the world who are also going in this direction. And my path came across with Michael Reynolds, who is a famous architect who is based in New Mexico.
Yeah, Earthship Biotecture, right?
Exactly, the founder of Earthship Biotecture. And I contacted him, and I was like so convinced that what he was doing was going the right direction. So I told him, I'll come, I'll work for free for you. I just want to learn everything that you're doing. I was so inspired by his work. Mm-hmm. So I went there and I started working with him. And then eventually I got hired, and I started traveling with the team all around the world and developing these buildings. And I realized, this is the future. This is how we have to develop our buildings. Mm-hmm. And so I decided early on that I'm going to spend, at least 10 years to master this concept. Wow. And then I'm going to develop my own branch out of it, which is Biotonomy today, and offer, more alternative designs and with more alternative materials, but also to bring back the concept to urban areas, because
Right.
That's very important, because most of our pollution is happening in urban areas.
Exactly. Mhm. And I feel that the more people abandon the cities, they become more dystopic. That the cities actually need to change, because they are a locus for many people, like you said, of pollution and of kind of we know and anticipate the boom and rise of these megacities, of incredible density. And I don't know what you have to say about people who have the approach that we need to be more dense, we need to be more vertical. And, what is your feeling about that? As you were saying, you used to build high rises and you felt that was a wrong direction, but some people are absolutely adamant that we need to build vertical.
Well, see, the reason we keep, making our cities is so dense is because the capital is there, the money is there. Mm-hmm. So we value those pieces of properties, those pieces of land as a good investment, because if we develop our buildings there, then we get a good return of investment when we sell them. Okay, I agree financially that's a good strategy, but now we understand that the table have turned and we have to be more ecological minded when we develop our buildings. Mm-hmm. So instead of just, packing onto our buildings, we should be more responsible, and we should actually place our buildings in areas that we humans have degraded, mm-hmm. and make a plan that we're going to develop here and turn this area back and create an ecosystem here, restore the ecosystem that we destroyed here, mm-hmm. And put more value into that. Because see, today we just go and we take a piece of property and we just clear all the ecosystem that already exists there.
So destructive.
Yeah, and we do it in cities as well. This is how we kill the ecosystems in our city. So we're saying, because see, we can't hide the fact that every building has a footprint on this planet. Mm-hmm. So we have to make sure that we place that footprint in a responsible way. Mm-hmm. So I believe that placing our buildings on degraded land with a plan of reusing our byproducts to help
restore
the ecosystem is a more responsible approach.
More harmonious living, because I can't tell you, especially living here. It's Tongva lands, but we also have to say it's Los Angeles, because that's really kind of the superficial level. The way people live is from a totally different paradigm than the Tongva. And it's very difficult to witness every day, every single square inch of land being developed, and in the wrong way, as according to what we're talking about. So, people just take their bulldozers. They never think twice of what's happening. They don't even know what's happening in the soil, to the microorganisms, to the mycelial network. They have no idea. And nor do they seem to care. Right. I think it's just a lot of ignorance that we have. And it's a big, what do you have to say about the educational process of getting people to remember that we are related to everything around us and underneath us, above us?
Yeah, I think you made a great point there, that education has an important part of this, because let's just take designers, architects, for example, in this world. Architects and builders are just educated to build the same way over and over and over. Mm-hmm. Yeah, almost if
they're rewarded for it, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And they're rewarded for these, artistic buildings that they make, but and they greenwash them these days. They just decorate them with a lot of plants and call them sustainable, but underneath the facade, all the buildings are still consuming from the infrastructure. Mm-hmm. But see, what needs to fundamentally change is basically the environmental crisis that we're facing today is pretty much a giant design crisis. Mm-hmm. We the way we design our buildings, our landscape, our roads, the way we consume everything is just a design crisis. If we go back and understand how to design more aligned with the natural world, then we won't create all these pollution that we're creating in this world. So what I'm saying is that the future of architecture should be about developing and designing ecosystems, not just about developing structures.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing
that's a great point you make. Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing architects are learning in school today, is how to create just dead structures. There's no relationship with the natural world. So you can't blame the architects when they come out and they have no understanding of how to develop a building that is operating in harmony with the natural world.
Do you work with any kind of architectural schools? I mean, places like Sci Art, places that are more progressive, that there may be interest in, obviously this can be a whole movement globally and needs to be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. We are in some early discussions with some universities where we're bringing this concept to them, because this is actually far beyond than what they're teaching in their universities. They're still very much stuck in the whole green building certification system, which is like a 50 years old concept.
Tell us what's wrong with that.
All these certifications that we have for green buildings today, they're called LEED certification, BREEAM certification. There's so many of them today. All of these benefit the economy much more than the ecology. And they're all based on a theoretical certification. So basically, you design a building and then you calculate how it's going to consume energy, and then you go and apply for the certification before you even have built the building. You get your certification, you market yourself as a green building, you build it, and then when they've gone back to these buildings and made tests on them, they've seen that most of them actually consume much more energy than they promised. So it is very clear now in the market today, they call this the energy performance gap, that these kind of certification systems are not sustainable. This is just, we're just lying to ourselves. So obviously now more and more companies are realizing this, and less people want to actually recognize themselves with this certification system.
So you think that's going to change then, or you see that changing now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, the only thing these certifications are addressing basically most of the time is energy, is lowering energy consumption. Everyone is talking about carbon emissions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the reality is that when you look at buildings today, it's not only emissions that is the problem. The amount of water consumption and the amount of sewage that we produce in our buildings also have a big impact on the biodiversity loss and the climate change. Look, one simple fact, that almost 80% of today's sewage is still not treated. It goes straight into nature, basically. Wow. That says a lot about how our buildings are developed.
I'm sure most people don't know that either.
Yeah, exactly. Because we see no relation. We flush the toilet and then we don't see what happens. While in our buildings, every time you're consuming the water, that water goes automatically into a greenhouse zone where you are growing plants. So you're reusing your own water, your gray water, for growing food. So if you put something bad in your water, if you use chemical soap, if you use chemical detergent,
medication,
that's going to straight go into your food, right? So there's a relationship there that makes you to realize, okay, I should be more responsible what I put in my water, what I put in my sewage drain.
Absolutely. We're going to take a break in just 1 minute, but I want to say that, I watched one of your videos on YouTube, and it was a drone's eye view over structures. They were embedded. It looked like kind of in a forested area. It was like a scene out of Avatar. And while we're in flight over this area, the tagline asks us to imagine living with nature free from economic stress. So We're going to take a break right here, but we'll come back with that and have you elaborate.
Okay.
Hey, listeners, quick break here. We hope that you're enjoying Eco Justice Radio. Stay connected by subscribing on all major podcast apps and visit our website, ecojusticeradio.org, to check out previous shows and guests and get connected with us on social media. For an extended version of this interview, as well as other benefits, we encourage you to become a member of our Patreon. You are listening to Biotonomy, designing nature-based green buildings and cities, with host Carrie Kim and guest Moein Nodehi, CEO and lead architect for Biotonomy.
So, Moein, if you could go back and explain about this tagline, because, of course, it's so enticing to hear that we could live with nature, free from economic stress, especially coming off the pandemic, as we know so many people are struggling and have struggled financially. And it's not just since 2020. There's many, many people, as we know, in Black and Brown communities. There's so much social inequity going on and has been going on for hundreds of years. So if you could speak to us on how Biotonomy envisions this possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, besides on focusing on nature's well-being, we also have to focus on our own well-being. So, the planet is stressed, and so are we, and this is clear. One of the main reasons we are stressed is because this constant of making a living. We have to make a living in order to survive. While you look at any other species on this planet, they've figured out their survival already. Even a worm knows how to survive without having to make a. So how come we don't understand this, and yet we think we are, the most intellectual species on this planet? Well, we constantly are working in order to pay our basic needs to survive. Mm-hmm. Basically, we need comfortable shelter. Mm-hmm. Which we need housing, so we have to pay rent every month for our buildings. Mm-hmm. We need food, so we have to pay for food every day. We need water, so we have to pay for water every day. Mm-hmm. We need sanitation. Everyone pays for their sanitation. Most people don't think about it, but it's included in your rent. Mm-hmm. Your sewage. You have to pay for the sewage.
Your trash.
Exactly. So when you make a building operate autonomously without depending on infrastructure, it's all the system for it to produce all the utilities that you need is already incorporated in the design. Mm-hmm. So the building is able to produce natural temperatures and keep you comfortable inside. Mm-hmm. The building is able to produce clean, drinkable water for you. Mm-hmm. You can produce fruits and vegetables inside your house. Mm-hmm. You can produce your own electricity. Basically, all the basic necessities that we need to live a comfortable life on this planet, we can make our buildings produce that for us.
Right. That's amazing. I mean, it's amazing just to think of getting rid of every single utility bill you have, essentially, and having your own water, food production, all of this contained within your own homes. And then, of course, sharing. I don't know if you are right now or if you have any projects underway that are being built more as a village. It was like that one video I was discussing earlier, which it looked like it was more of kind of a community setting.
Yes, absolutely. We're actually involved in several different community projects at this point, where we're looking at, like that video you're referring to. That's a project that's planned, going to happen in Canada. Uh-huh. And we have several other projects similar to that we're involved in Greece, in Italy, and here in Spain as well. Because we've proven that it's possible to develop buildings that operate autonomously. So now there's so many buildings around the world that operate like this. People are now open and ready to do it on a larger scale. Mm-hmm. And
I think the pandemic also has taught many people, I think, that living in isolation isn't some idealistic thing. It's actually much more difficult to live isolated.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We know it's already happening, that there's many eco-communities, there's land trusts, there's different ways. And then we have indigenous peoples who have lived in community. That is just the way they live. And so, it's natural that we would be understanding it's time to return to that. And that's going to be a solution to our species survival. Could you talk to us about where it is that you have been receiving the greatest support for autonomous building globally? This includes dealing with regulations and support through governance. And maybe you're entirely, off grid in that sense. So if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, honestly, the greatest support is coming from people, from normal people like me and you, people who understand the importance of taking it to this direction. The most challenging has been the regulations.
Okay.
Absolutely. 10 years ago, it was so difficult to get permission for building a building like this. Today, we're much more aware about the environmental crisis. So now the regulations are opening up slowly and slowly. But the regulation definitely has been the biggest challenge. But the amount of people who gets involved in our project and come and volunteer and really put their heart and put their soul into it because they so believe this is the future way of living. This is really what keeps motivating me to go for this, even though I'm completely...
The tide will turn. The tide will turn, as we know. It's kind of like taking a barge and trying to redirect a barge going in one direction. So we know it takes a little bit of time, but then there's also momentum. So, we know that part of those regulations, I'm sure not all of it is to protect people, but is really kind of by design or by capitalistic design to keep a certain system going that perpetuates itself, just like the medical system or the Western medical system. There's investment in keeping the same thing going because certain people profit off that system.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one part of it that's pretty clear to most of us. But on the other hand, there's also the truth that a lot of regulations we put out there is, for our own, based on good intentions as well. We're trying to make sure we're doing things in a safe way. But there's just so much of it at this point that we're just suffocating ourselves. We're not allowing innovation to happen. So this is where, we have to work with policymakers.
Right.
We can't fight them,
Yeah. Change policy, right? Educate and change policy, work together.
Exactly.
To develop the best policies.
Yeah, and this is what we're going for. We're creating collaborations with universities so we can do R&D projects with universities where we can gather data and we can take this data and go to the policymakers and be like, look, this is good for the environment. This is good for our well-being. This is good for everyone. And make them make the policy, because unless they may change the policy, we won't see great change happen, So that's why we have to work within the system, and we can't wait for our leaders to take decisions. Most of our leaders are not even aware of the possibilities. We as people have to stand up and show and become an example for our leaders.
Exactly. Well, they don't live like this. We know most of the leaders are not living in this manner of autonomous, living. So, I am curious though whether there are any government, countries that actually would support, where you could actually work with a government that was more progressive or more aware. Whether it's a place like Costa Rica, or not that every government. Even Costa Rica is not. It's not like a purist place. There's plenty of corruption in every country, but I don't rule out that possibility.
Based on our experience, the countries that we call the most developed countries is actually the most difficult countries to make this innovation happening.
Sure.
In other parts of the world where gladly they haven't gathered as much as regulations, they're so much more open to this kind of concept. Also because they also lack a lot of infrastructure,
right.
So they really understand the need of developing buildings without infrastructure.
Exactly.
So in other parts of the world, in Asia, in Africa, in South America, they're much more open to this way, and they're actually making faster progress because of this.
Yeah, and they will leapfrog, Central America too, I imagine. There's so many places where the crises of economics also drives this change.
Absolutely. That's a great point, because look, before we were all focusing that, this is just an environmental problem. But now this has turned into a giant financial problem, because every time there's extreme weather event happening in our cities, we are paying up for that. Mm-hmm. We are paying so much money. I was reading somewhere that they're estimated that just the United States is paying annually up to $360 billion of the cost of these extreme weather events and climate change. Every time a hurricane comes, every time there's a flood, it wipes out the infrastructure, and someone have to rebuild that. Right. And if we're going to keep doing that over and over, that's not a good investment. So now, the economical market is also understanding the financial benefits of developing autonomous buildings instead of infrastructure development.
Can you speak about longevity? I was in the Ecuadorian Amazon with the Achuar tribe and Pachamama Alliance, and they would say down there that if a home lasted more than 10 years, it wasn't considered a successful home. The best home was one that dissolved right back into nature in 10 years. And I wonder how are you building, and how long do you anticipate the autonomous structures to last? I mean, obviously it's not, fixed in stone, set in stone, but.
Well, actually, see, if you compare our buildings to conventional building, you will quickly realize that the amount of mass that we integrate in these buildings are much more. This is how we maintain comfortable temperatures in our buildings, is that we integrate more mass. Mm-hmm. Now, we mainly just use natural materials to do this. We integrate earth and basically stone, materials that can store temperatures. Mm-hmm. So our buildings are way more massive than conventional buildings. Conventional buildings are built with minimal, very thin walls. That's why they constant are consuming energy to keep comfortable temperatures. Mm-hmm. But our buildings are basically integrated into the landscape. You can't really, this is another problem we have when we do building permissions. You can't really put a clear line of where is the landscape and where is the building, because it's so integrated into the land. Okay. So you really you don't mess with the nature around it. You just integrate yourself into it. Mm-hmm. However, when I design a building, for me, in my mind, that building should last at least 100 years.
Mm-hmm. But it's naturally built, so it's,
Exactly. It's naturally built, is integrated into the earth. So if you do that approach, it should last long. I mean, that's really what's sustainable, is something that can last long, So that's important, I think, that we develop buildings that are solid, because not only do they last longer, but they also perform better.
Right. I think in the Amazon, they would allow it to dissolve, and then they would find a new home elsewhere. So they weren't impacting that particular area of land. I really would have to ask to know more, but that's what they would do. Let it dissolve, and then they'd relocate their home.
The thing is that they are really living a simple, basic life. These people have really no needs.
And almost no materiality outside of,
Exactly. They basically, they live of nature. They live with nature. Mm-hmm. They don't even have a word for nature in these cultures.
That's separate,
But the thing is, with us today, we've collected so many needs. We have so many needs today, what we call the modern man, that, we want to have a washing machine, and we want to have this and that. We call this our standard of living today. And if you're going to live like that yes, you have to develop a more advanced building. And if you're going to go with that approach, then, you should build something that is solid, that lasts, in many generations. But their approach, why they're able to, have their building built every 10 years is because they live of nature.
Right. They don't have, then, yeah, exactly right. As you said, they don't have all these extra needs. They wash in the river and it's a very,
and that's not where people want to go. Like if you promote people like go back into nature and build they can't. They didn't grow up like that. They've lost that wisdom of how to do that. The best way to address their needs today is to do that. We build comfortable buildings. See, if you want people to change a behavior, you have to offer them something better. And that's what we're doing at Biotonomy. See, many people believe that living a sustainable life means that you have to sacrifice.
Right, be deprived or something, yeah.
But we're showing them that is not the truth. First of all, you don't have to sacrifice in design. You can actually make your buildings look much better than the average buildings are. And second of all, you will gain so much more well-being out of living in this way compared to living in a built
environment,
toxic environment, basically.
It's off-gassing and all the rest. Not to mention being fully wired up. And I had a naturopathic mentor for many, many years, and he used to always complain about the impact of rebar in conventional architecture and how that interferes with our nervous system regulation and, electromagnetic frequencies. So could you speak about those benefits of autonomous buildings made from natural materials?
Yeah, I mean, naturally, see, our brains, like our entire body was developed in natural environment. So the more we are surrounded by natural materials, natural forms and geometry, the more sense of harmony we will naturally feel. And, a lot of people, like when they enter ancient buildings or structures, they naturally sense a feeling of harmony because especially like temples, when they design buildings like this, they had this in mind to create a space that creates harmony. So they, most of the time, just by using the right geometry in their design, they can achieve that well-being. Now, if you also use natural materials like stone, like earth, this will also affect you vibrationally, like on a cellular level,
Oh, you can feel the difference. I mean, I don't think anyone, it's so tangible and visceral, the difference. I remember being in a 100% pine home down in Panama, being in, adobe and towels. I mean, these things are really palpable.
Yeah, exactly. Now, here's the thing, like we don't shove this in people's throat. You can still build the autonomous building without having to use natural materials. If you don't, we do recommend to do it, but if people don't want to do it, we're still open to help them and make their building happen with the kind of materials that they prefer.
Right. And you had said that you also design for existing buildings to make them maybe leaning more autonomously. So I don't know what that looks like, or if it's just you work with the person to see what it is that how far they want to go.
No, absolutely. I mean, our existing buildings all need to be retrofitted to perform better. So a lot of old buildings need to be fixed up. So instead of just doing it the conventional way, let's look at it how we can do it and make them perform more autonomously. How can we integrate nature-based solutions into already existing buildings? And we've done projects like this, and we're involved in actually large-scale projects right now in Scandinavia, where they have to reform all their social housing that they develop because they're consuming a lot of energy and they're shown not to be a healthy environment. So together with them, we're now looking into how we can integrate our nature-based solution and make their buildings perform autonomously and cooperate with nature. So we're adding on these concrete rectangle of buildings, we're adding greenhouses, and we're creating jungles in front of them, and we're creating this natural environment where we're reusing the wastewater from the building into the greenhouse zone, and we're treating it with biological methods and creating, natural capital for urban environments, basically. So retrofitting existing buildings, I would say, is even more important, because we have already so many structures.
Right.
If we just understand how to make them to operate with their surrounding environment, they can also become autonomous.
Exactly. We're going to take a break right here, Moein, and then we'll come right back.
Hey, listeners, quick break here. We hope that you're enjoying Eco Justice Radio. Stay connected by subscribing on all major podcast apps and visit our website, ecojusticeradio.org, to check out previous shows and guests and get connected with us on social media. For an extended version of this interview, as well as other benefits, we encourage you to become a member of our Patreon. You are listening to Biotonomy, designing nature-based green buildings and cities, with host Carrie Kim and guest Moein Nodehi, CEO and lead architect for Biotonomy.
So, Moein, could you explain some of the core Biotonomy design principles?
Yes, absolutely. So basically, our design principles are based on the necessities that we have to live on this planet, the necessities we have to sustain life. So the first principle, the first design principle that we integrate in our building is natural heating and cooling.
Mm-hmm.
So we've proven that by design and by choosing materials and by placing them in a strategic way, we can develop buildings that can maintain comfortable temperatures all year around, both in extreme warm and extreme cold weathers. Like we've done this, we've proven that this is possible without depending on any electrical or mechanical components.
That's amazing.
All based on physics.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second design principle is to make all our buildings harvest their own water and produce their own drinkable water.
Mm-hmm.
So we design the roof and the surrounding landscape. So every time there is rain, we make sure to harvest that water and store it under the ground. Mm-hmm. And then we have our own filtration system, and we produce our own clean water. And then all the buildings produce wastewater, sewage. Mm-hmm. And so what we do is that we integrate a water recycling system in these buildings, where we use biological methods to treat all the sewage on the site. Mm-hmm. So everything is treated on the site. And basically how this works is that we take our wastewater and we turn it into natural capital. We turn it into biomass. Mm-hmm. We use plants to filter and clean it, but also we use plants to consume the wastewater. Mm-hmm. So in the end of the cycle, there's no wastewater.
Nothing wasted.
Nothing wasted. Everything is just turned into
recycled and recycled.
Exactly.
So I have a question. Well, probably have more design principles. Are there more of those, or some basic?
Yeah, I can mention the last ones quickly. And then we have food production inside of the buildings, which is related to the recycling and the cleaning of the wastewater. Mm-hmm. So all the buildings that we build have an integrated greenhouse zone where they produce their own fruits and vegetables. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have taken to the next level. They even have their own ponds where they produce their own fish, etc. Mm-hmm. And then electricity is very well known. We can, with renewable energy, with solar panels and wind power, we can produce our own electricity. And also the last principle is that we use as much as possible natural and recycled materials to develop these buildings.
So with the electricity, you can actually sustain the household, all of their electrical needs, just from within the structure.
Yes, and the reason why we can do that is because, see,
Because of the battery.
Almost 80% of the energy consumption of every building goes to heating and cooling.
Uh-huh.
So when your building is heating and cooling itself naturally, you only need about 20 to 30% of electricity for your appliances.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right. It's like the building, you're right. I mean, obviously that's makes
so the
sense.
investment for solar panel and wind power suddenly becomes affordable because you're only using electricity for lights and some simple pumps to run your water system.
Mm-hmm. And what about Wi-Fi? Because people are still connecting globally, even if they're going to be in this kind of environment. I don't know what you envision as far as that.
Well, absolutely. Wi-Fi is, a modern need that we have today.
Mm-hmm.
And today there's no good enough off-grid solution for that. So most of the buildings that we build, they're just connected to the Wi-Fi. But, I'm sure there's going to be innovations
around that. Sure, as more and more people do it. I have a question around the water. So this is more about when we talk about rainwater and rainwater capture, because I don't know if you're familiar with Zach Bush, but he talks a lot. He's done a lot of research with the Farm Belt here and has done a lot of research around glyphosate and how much glyphosate, because it's water soluble, known as Roundup by many, has penetrated into the water systems, and that it's even in 75% of the rainwater now. So I just wonder how we deal with that in our filtration systems.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I know about Zach. I think he's an amazing inspiration, and he's completely right. Unfortunately, it's not only our water; it's our soil, it's our ground. Every drop of water that hits that ground that's polluted gets polluted as well. So even the groundwater is unfortunately polluted as well. So basically, we have in our filtration system, beside of particle filters, we also have filters that kill, like on a microbiological level, and makes the water really pure. And we've tested the water from our systems and compared with water coming from bottled water or water coming from taps in countries where they're certified drinking water taps. And our result always showed that it's a cleaner water.
Well, we know the bottled water is terrible on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
But also, I wonder what kind of innovations are happening. People work with mycoremediation and what the possibility is with mushrooms to clean up water, because I know that is something that is also happening.
Exactly. And this is the great part of what we do, is that every time there's a new innovation in one of these design principles, we integrate them into our buildings. We didn't invent these solutions. All we're doing is the combination that we're putting them together to operate holistically. That's the innovation we do. But the solar panels, the water filtrations, and all of these are not things that we invented. But we're demonstrating how you combine these to make buildings operate autonomously.
Can you tell us about some of your, premier projects? You have projects all over the world. You have projects in Haiti and Puerto Rico and Indonesia. This ecotourism island in Indonesia is very interesting, as well as the primary school in Haiti. If you could just choose a couple of projects to highlight for listeners.
Absolutely. So some of them are projects where I collaborate with Earthship Biotecture, with Michael Reynolds. And a lot of the school projects that we do around the world are together with Michael Reynolds. And they're gaining a lot of popularity because this is the kind of environment you want to teach the young people in. You want to teach the young people in an environment that is demonstrating the way of living, when you're demonstrating how to live sustainably in a building that is not sustainable itself, what are you really teaching kids.
They will remember that too, because they're so impressionable when they're young,
So these schools that we're doing around the world, we've done a lot in South America, and the latest one we did was in Haiti, and then now we're going back together with Earthships in May to Puerto Rico to build another one. The children are part of the entire system. They understand that when they consume the water, where does the water go? When they flush the toilet, what does that turn into?
Mm-hmm.
So the school projects are gaining a lot of popularity, and I'm very happy about that because that's one of my favorite projects to be involved in.
Mm-hmm.
And then with Biotonomy, we recently did a building in Lebanon,
mm-hmm.
where it was a very interesting project because, see, Lebanon is a country where there's a lot of conflict in between different groups.
Mm-hmm.
I've probably never experienced conflict on that level anywhere else I've been to.
Mm-hmm.
So this project that we did there was cultural center that the building was going to be used as. Mm-hmm. So the way we organized the building, we turned it into a program to promote peace in between these groups. So we basically, it's like a conflict resolution program. So we brought people from different groups and we put them on the same team to develop this autonomous buildings.
Uh-huh.
So we had to deal with a lot of conflict in the beginning between these people. But after a couple of weeks, when everyone really started to understand what they were developing together, and they were really feeling that they were bringing change into this world, we turned into best friends.
By cooperating.
Exactly. And these are people coming from different religious groups that, really hate each other.
Historical animosity. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But this project made them to understand that, look, we all need the same things. And if we can cooperate, we can develop, these buildings that can provide the things we need to sustain life.
Exactly. Working for common cause always changes, has the potential for change anyway. Could you speak about how accessible bioautonomy is for different socioeconomic classes? Is there a sliding scale approach to building? How affordable is it for your average person? Or again, is it just that you choose, what's within their budget, how they could afford to live?
Right. So going back to when we were speaking about how the ancient people live so basic, and that's because, they pretty much haven't gathered so much needs, this comes back to us. Look, the more needs you have as a person, the more you're going to have to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're ready to meet your needs, you can really develop these buildings affordably. You can even see a lot of methods that we use is not rocket science. A lot of it is based on logic, and it's low tech. Because it's nature-based, it's also low tech. So a lot of people just come and build with us and learn it, and then they go and do it themselves because it's more affordable to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really, want to do this and you're really passionate about it, you can come, you can learn from us, and you can go and do it yourself. Mm-hmm. If you, on the other hand, don't have that time and you would like someone else to come and build it for it, then we can design something within your budget and something that meets your needs and build that for you. If you're a person who has a lot of needs, you want, a 2-story building, and you want to have 3 washing machines and a big flat screen,
your swimming pool and
all of that, that's fine. We can design you something that fits your needs and that operates in harmony with nature, because it is as important to address those people's needs as those who has less needs,
Right.
So,
well, there's all levels of people in it, and we are living here and cohabiting on this planet, and it's necessary for everyone to change to the degree that they can. And hopefully in that transition, they just keep going. It's like you start a little bit, one step, and then they leads to, 10 more steps.
Exactly.
Could you tell us a little bit about the ecotourism island in Indonesia? Because it just I love to hear that it's this environment with no use of fossil fuel. Just that alone is like music to the ears, you know.
Right. So in Indonesia, they develop a lot of tourist areas because they live on tourism.
Mm-hmm.
So they had all these islands where they just were going to do the conventional way of tourism, but all these islands, you know, they need infrastructure from the mainland, so they have to bring, you know, all these infrastructure through the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to destroy a lot of ecosystems in the oceans to bring the utilities. So we went in there and we were like, look, why do all that investment and why destroy all that nature when you can develop your buildings with nature-based solutions and you can make them operate themselves? And this was new for them. So they were very interested. So they took a whole island and they said, okay, let's try this on this island.
Mm-hmm.
So I was early on with them in the discussion of how to do this, and they wanted to do this on a large scale. So I went back to Michael Reynolds from Earthship Biotexture, and I told them, look, these guys really want to make a big effort to turn this island into autonomous eco-resort.
Mm-hmm.
So I got Michael Reynolds involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started, we made 2 buildings on that island. And then, unfortunately, somehow in their government, the people who were in charge for that project changed. Mm-hmm. And they kind of changed their mind of the direction they wanted to go with that island. So it's kind of on hold at the moment.
Okay.
So we will have to see if we get the opportunity to go back there. But we built 2 buildings and we proved that, you know, even in a tropical climate, you know, you can build these buildings.
Right. And actually up level what you're doing, like you said, to not have to depend on all that infrastructure.
Exactly.
So, you know, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about the learning and volunteering with you and how it's structured. I mean, do people come for specific projects? I mean, how do they do that? And how long is their commitment? How long does their commitment have to be? Is it just variable, project to project?
So one of the most popular program that people jump onto is the academy programs, where you actually come for 1 month and you're participating on a building from start to finish. Mm-hmm. So you get 1 day in class learning the theory of the building process, and then the next day you're on site and learning hands-on how to do it. So this is the program that you gain most of the knowledge. Pretty much a lot of people who participate in these programs are able to go back and do their own projects. Mm-hmm. And then there's also, internship programs where you can come and only do the hands-on part and part of the construction. And now we're also working on setting up Biotonomy Academy, online academy. This is very much thanks to what happened with COVID. And
right, everyone's online. Mm-hmm.
Everyone's online. So, and we got so much demand for people wanting to learn. So now we're setting up we're building it as we're speaking.
The curriculum. And when do you anticipate that being launched?
Hopefully this year.
Uh-huh.
Hopefully this year. And then we're just going to build onto it. And then eventually, we're going to have different levels where we're going to be able to even offer architects who are already working with conventional buildings and just teach them how to switch their way of thinking and designing to get along with this. So our goal is to spread our knowledge as much as possible and get as many as people possible to do this. We're only scratching the surface on this. There's so much room for everyone to jump on this. Yeah. This is no competition, Mm-hmm. We have to collaborate to make this good.
Yeah, well, I think that's the beauty of it in this building. I think it does become it is naturally collaborative, and it's sort of built in. because you're working with nature. And so that nature is naturally collaborative.
Exactly. I mean, we've been taught in school that, evolution is based on competition. But if you look in nature, that is not true. If you look at how the roots under the ground collaborate, you can see that true evolution is based on collaboration.
Yeah, and recognizing our interdependency. I was just curious, who are some of your building muses from ancient cultures? I mean, probably you have different inspirations, but have there been some cultures that have really impacted the way you build more than others?
Well, I was born in Iran. And in Iran, we have a lot of history of traditional buildings. And that's pretty much where I started to look into was the traditional way we're building in Iran. And I came across this part of Iran called Yazd, where they've built an entire city in the desert. And they've pretty much, most of these design principles that I told you, they were applied to these buildings. Like they were maintaining comfortable buildings in the desert where they had, the sun just cooking on their buildings. But they integrated all these systems in their buildings. So when I started looking into, and these buildings exist today, you can go and visit them. You can see that it works. And when I realized that, that made me start investigating more. And then I went into and I started to look, a lot of ancient buildings in India. They were very much focused on water. So that's what I got a lot of my inspiration about water. And then when it came to geometry and materials, I got a lot of inspiration from the ancient Egyptian architecture. So...
Well, it's phenomenal what you're doing. We're very much inspired by what you're doing. We know that the global movement will continue to accelerate and that more and more people are going to be drawn into this. And we're thankful, actually, to the pandemic to actually kind of have pushed things even more in this direction. I think more and more people had the disruption of the pandemic made them question, our lifestyles more, if they weren't already doing so. And I wonder, we're going to wrap up now, and I wondered if you could tell listeners how they can find you, how they can reach out to Biotonomy. What's the best way to be in contact with you?
Yes, so we have our website, biotonomy.com. And then we're also on most of the social media platforms. We're on Facebook at Biotonomy, Instagram at Biotonomy. We're on LinkedIn and Pinterest and YouTube. So, wherever platform you're more comfortable, you can join us there and sign up on our website because we're going to notify you as soon as we're releasing the Biotonomy Online Academy. And every time we have a new project where you can get involved, you will also be notified about it.
Thank you so much, Moein. It's been just amazing to speak with you about this. And it's great to learn that this is happening and it's happening globally. So thank you and all that you are manifesting with Biotonomy. And listeners, check out Biotonomy online, volunteer on project, and learn as much as you can. Spread the good word.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Thank you for having me. And thank you for what you're doing.
Anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you to our guest today, Moein Nodehi, and thank you to our listeners for joining us. This has been Biotonomy, designing nature-based green buildings and cities. Please connect with us on social media at EcoJustice Radio and SoCal 350. If you like what you heard and you want others to be informed, subscribe to our podcast, share the episodes, and help us continue our efforts by making a donation to the show at ecojusticeradio.org. You have been listening to EcoJustice Radio on KPFK Los Angeles. A project of SoCal 350, the show can be found on kpfk.org, all major podcast apps, and at ecojusticeradio.org. Created by Mark and JP Morse, executive producer Jack Ite, producer Jessica Aldridge, engineer Blake Lampkin, interview hosted by Carrie Kim, and original music by Javier Cadre. And until next time, remember, the power is yours.